So we looked at the session 3, 4 and 5 in the last session. Now we'll be looking at session 6 and 7, which is to do with learning outcome learning outcome 4, which will be looking at presenting information orally effectively in health and social care. So in the last session, which was looking at identifying key elements of effective communication, we looked at a variety of communication methods used within the care settings. We also looked at why clear communication is so important. We looked at key information needed on handover notes, and we looked at how others can perceive you as a care worker due to communication skills, and we looked at some examples in regards to that. So we looked at the fact of how important it is to take instructions and how important it is to take instructions correctly, and why there's an issue around that in some institutions and some places. We looked at the communication cycle. We looked at where messages are sent, received, interpreted and understood, and then feedback given, and where the communication is needed, and where the message is prepared on the communication cycle. We also looked at effective communication, so the key elements of effective communication, which is the sender, who is the person starting the communication, the message, so what the sender wishes to communicate, the medium, so the method of communication, so is it verbal, written, signed, electronic, or telephone, etc. We looked at the receiver, which is the person who receives the message, and how that person interprets that message as well is really important. We looked at understanding, so the message has to be correctly interpreted by the receiver. And then we looked at feedback, where the receiver needs to show the sender that he or she has received the message from them and has really understood what they are saying in regards to the message. And we looked at the issue in regards to having a communication cycle, effective communication cycle. We looked at what silent whispers are, and we looked at what clear speech is and why it's so important within the health and social care to have clear speech. An example would be, for example, if you were dealing with an elderly patient who is hard of hearing and has difficulty understanding what you are saying, your body language is a way so that they could gain further understanding, and also lip reading. We looked at the importance again of giving instructions. We looked at the effects that can, what effects can these issues have on communication. So we looked at what words are often not pronounced correctly by young people. So things like slang and jargon. We looked at where words have different meanings. We had an activity where we looked at the newspaper construction and how the group was put into two, and how the teamwork skills and how the skills and what they could change in regards to working together. We also looked at the non-verbal case study about John, and then we went on to look at the technology that is used to communicate, identify social networking logos, identifying non-verbal communication consists of, and we also looked at identifying key functions on mobile phones and explaining different forms of communication used in a care setting. There was an example of how can you change an English sentence from slang. So there was things like the abbreviation on a text, "Don't be like that, mate." An example such as that. We looked at what technology you can use to communicate, things like infrastructure, telephone services, audio conferences, voice messaging, video conferencing, web application, mobility, instant messaging, calendar, collaboration, and email. We also looked at non-verbal communication, why it's so important in regards to understanding body language and how it gives people an idea of what they're feeling and what they're understanding. We looked at mobile phones and what facilities they have. Then the importance of creating a poster. We also looked at different forms of communication. Again, we looked at that in the example of the case study of John. We then went on to look at how posture can demonstrate negative body language and identify positive language to demonstrate different situations. We looked at identifying what they may consider when communicating and justifying why listening information is very important. We looked at a role play again with John in regards to posture. We then looked at why must we consider when what must we consider when communicating? So things like, you know, context of communication, whether it's one-to-one communication or whether it's group discussion. We looked at the importance of that, who we need to communicate to, so parents, carers or service users, a child, professional, and any needs that maybe we need to take into consideration, things like, you know, barriers to communication, things like culture, age, reasons and time and resources. You know, sometimes culturally can be a big issue in communication because people don't have an understanding. And age, you know, the fact that someone is old and is not able to understand what you are talking about, the jargon you are using, the language you are using, maybe they have disabilities or they're hard of hearing. So these are things we must consider when communicating with someone. We then went on to look at the importance of listening, and that is so important because it's a two-way process and it's about understanding the person, but trying to be empathetic as well and trying to understand what they are saying. So by listening to them, by giving the person, you know, your full attention, you know, and being able to summarize what they are saying and listen. We then went on to look at what active listening is, the importance of active listening within the healthcare profession and why there's a need to listen carefully and understand what someone is saying, because you can try to, you know, you may have an issue understanding people because of their language. You may have an issue understanding people because of their age. So active listening is really important, and you need to establish that you are listening. So when you are in a conversation, you are sat there and you are nodding and, you know, prompting the person and, you know, identifying that you are listening and you are attentive and you are understanding and sensitive to what they are saying. Because sometimes when you are with a patient, the information the patient may be giving you is sensitive and confidential. So they need you to obviously portray an image, and also that will come from your body language, that you are listening, but you are attentive to what they are saying and understanding. So now we're going to go on to session 6, and we're looking at effective communication in health and social care. We'll be looking at the aims of the session is to justify how easy it can be to get the message across and when confusion may arise. We're looking at identifying alternative forms of communication. We're also looking at identifying difficulties with communication and how they could be adapted in order to help the individual understand. We'll also look at explaining positives and negatives of different forms of communication. So start activity, you could do this in your own time. In pairs, person 1 will draw a picture using simple shapes of squares and triangles. Person 1 describe the picture to person 2, and they are unable to repeat instructions. Person 2 can listen and carry out instructions, but are not allowed to ask questions. Students sit back to back to complete this activity. Starter, drawing images feedback. Now compare pictures for accuracy of size, shape, position, and pages. How easy was it to get the message across? And when did confusion arise? So this is really important in any sort of element of life, that, you know, you're able to get a message across to someone, but also, you know, that there is no confusion, that you're getting the message across, because sometimes people, maybe because of their age or disability, will confuse a message with something else. Key factors to remember: sometimes it is necessary to find alternative forms of communication to meet people particular needs, such as when communication challenges may be caused through visual and hearing impairments or learning difficulties. Communication difficulties. So give 3 different examples of communication difficulties that an individual might have, and explain what they could do to adapt the communication in order to help the individual understand, and share your ideas with the group. So this is something you could do in your own time. So what alternative forms of communication can be used in a setting? So there's a video there, and there's a class tools there that you could go on to, get the link on there and go onto that and see what kind of tools you can go. And you go around the room with your class fellows and identify any sort of others that have been missed out. So we've got some alternative forms of communication, and we've got things like, the first one being quite a popular one, Braille. And Braille is a system of raised dots that can be read with the fingers by people who are blind or who have low vision. Teachers, parents, and others are not visually impaired ordinarily read Braille with their eyes. Braille is not a language. So, Braille is a good thing within, using within the health and social care. Braille is a system for the blind, is made up of the dots, like it said, and it's very important because it's a tactile writing system for people that have got sight loss. The next one we're looking at is British Sign Language, and that again is another important element of within the health and social care. But it's British Sign Language, BSL, is a visual means of communicating using gestures, facial expressions, and body language. It is usually used by mainly people who are deaf or support those who have a hearing loss. In the UK, the most common sign language used is British Sign Language. And this is really important in communication, because you'll be able to communicate with deaf people, contributing to a society where deaf people are not discriminated against and are included. And it's a diversity thing as well, in case that you make sure that it's quite diverse. The next one is Makaton, and Makaton is the UK's leading programme for adults and children with learning or communication difficulties. It is a language programme that combines signs, symbols, and speech to give different options for people to communicate. Using signs can help people who do not use speech. Makaton is useful for language learning because the signs you learn directly translate into spoken English. For example, pointing the hand towards the mouth while saying food, hungry, or eat indicates that someone is eating. So, it's a tool that helps everyone in regards to, and especially within the health and social care sector as well. The next one is finger spelling. And finger spelling is a way of spelling words using hand movements, and is part of learning sign language. Each language of the alphabet has a different sign. British Sign Language uses a 2-handed version, whereas others, such as the American Sign Language, use only one. Sign language uses hand movements, facial expressions, and body language. You cannot use finger spelling as a substitute for sign language. It is used in signing, but only for words that do not have a sign or when it's unknown. Text messaging, obviously that is text messaging in regards to, that the fact that you can send messages through text as well. Interpreters of speech, so you will have special interpreters that will help in regards to speech therapy. that the individual would have issues around. Translators for written or verbal language, and you will have translators that will be face-to-face that will help with any sort of verbal language that if there's any issues around the disability. Objects of reference, and that's quite good in some institutions where people use objects to say something, or it's a form of communication, to try and identify it to the next person so that they understand. Communication passports is another one, and it's intended to give a brief snapshot about the person's dislikes and how they communicate and how best to communicate with that person. It's different from an in-depth person-centered plan or an essential lifestyle plan. So, it's one of the things that is used quite often to try and identify how the person best likes to be communicated. Also, it's intended, within the healthcare sector, it is used for care plans, and to support, it's a way of supporting vulnerable people with communication difficulties across transitions through complex information. So it's there to support them, and it's also the benefits of communication passports. It describes the person's most effective means of communication so that others can be better communication partners, so they understand the person, and they draw together information from the past and present, and from different contexts. So different people use them. It could be people like young people, children, adults who cannot easily speak for themselves. So it's one that pulls together all the complex information and presents it in an easy format. Then you have symbols as well, and that's quite a big thing used within health and social care profession, where it's symbol-based communication is often used by individuals who are unable to communicate using speech alone, and who have not yet developed or have difficulty developing literacy skills. Symbols offer a visual representation of a word or an idea. So it could be someone who's not confident in what they are saying, and it helps them identify things. And also within the healthcare setting, it's designed as a communication symbol to get things across. So, if there's a symbol with the fact that they are in pain, or if there's a symbol where they are sad, they could, identify that. But it does help in regards to, trying to represent certain words in symbols rather than verbally. And then we've got technology aids. That could be things like, there's different technologies available within communication aids, such as, alternative communication aids. There are a broad range of devices, including charts, symbols, any sort of devices, technology devices that would help within the health and social care profession, and text phones, telephone amplifiers, things like hearing loops as well. Electronic devices can be used both to send and receive messages. It's important to give the person using a communication device enough time to use it when they are communicating with them, because it's important that they are able to communicate what they want to say. So you could have, it could include things like electronic health records, computerized provider order entry, email and pages. These are technology is moved from face to face, but for like professionals it could be used in that. Technological aids also support effective communication by enabling individuals to understand and interact with people around them. So it's an easy way for them to communicate through devices, text messaging, as we mentioned, patient records, accessing different loop hearing, things like that, speech recognition software. So there's lots of softwares out there that would help both the patient and the professional. Pictures also indicate a sign to communicate with someone. Someone, you know, you can, you know, communicate through pictures, and it could be a set of coloured or black and white drawings, and that are an alternative way of communicating. And individuals who are unable to communicate using speech would use pictures to communicate and to get something across to, you know, the person, what they are saying. Pictures do play a big part. So it might be someone who's trying to represent their thoughts and feelings through pictures and ideas. You know, they may want to put their ideas across. So, you know, like if you, for example, if you had someone who had you had a picture that was a heart picture, a picture of a heart, that represents any sort of love and compassion. Any sort of tree symbol which represents growth and eternal life. So different pictures for different people represent different things, but it's a way of communicating for them, you know, and getting things across to them, because it identifies that they are listening, but there's different ways of listening. Then we've got advocates, and the support of an advocate is often particularly useful in meetings when someone might not feel confident in expressing themselves. So, you know, there may be things like, you know, the fact that they want to communicate, but they're not confident in communicating. So the advocate is there to support you, to ask all the questions you want and make sure that your points have been covered in the meeting, or, you know, it's just someone there as a support mechanism. An advocate in the health and social care profession would be an individual trained to help you understand your rights, express your views and wishes, and help ensure your voice is heard. You know, these are advocates that are there to act as a spokesperson for you. For example, they can help you understand the care and support process, or if there's any care plans to be put in place. So an advocate is a good alternative form of communication. So communication tables. So create a table on your computer like the one below to add notes as we cover each form of communication used to service users. So the diagram actually states there that there's forms of communication in the diagram. Who could this support? Positives and negatives. Alternative communication table. So add your listed forms of communication you identified as a group in this table. Add what you feel are the positives and negatives for each of the communication. And we will see if your views change throughout this unit. As we cover each of the communication, you can update this table, so save it carefully. So session 7, we're going to be looking at the aims of the session is to outline what Braille is. We looked a little bit about what Braille is earlier, but we're going to look at it in more detail. Identify where Braille came from. Outline your own name using Braille. Analyze own ability to complete and read Braille. Identify where Braille is used today and outline software that can be used to support Braille. So starter. Some expressions there of, you know, the fact that someone's feeling happy, cheeky, confused. So these are things that just identify our expression. So what's Braille? Braille is a method of reading by touching that is used by many blind and partially sighted people around the world. Each Braille character or cell is made up of 6 dot positions, arranged in a vertical rectangle or 2 columns of 3 dots each. 6 dots of each Braille cell are arranged like the example above to form a letter. The dots are numbered 1 through 6, starting in the upper left corner going down. The dots are raised in one of the 64 possible combinations, and each combination represents a different letter or sound. The character that each combination represents varies somewhat between languages, but that dot height, cell size, and cell spacing are always consistent. Formatting of Braille, however, such as the positioning of the main headings, is used in Braille in the much way as in print. Braille, universally accepted system of writing used by and for blind person and consisting of a code 63 characters, each made up of 6 dots raised in a 6-position matrix. These Braille characters are embossed in lines on paper and read by passing the fingers lightly over the manuscript. Where did Braille come from? Now, there's a video there that you could have a look at in your own time, but I'm going to go through where it actually came from. So Louis Braille, who was blinded at the age of 3, invented the system in 1824. While a student at the Institution National des Jeux Avengers, which is the National Institution for Blind Children, Paris, the Frenchman was Valentin, who was the first person to emboss paper as means of reading for the blind. And the history of Braille goes way back to the 1800s. And it was a man called Charles Barbier who served in Napoleon Bonaparte's French army, developed a unique system known as night writing, so soldiers could communicate safely during the night. As a military veteran, Barbier saw several soldiers killed because they used lamps after dark to combat messages. As a result of the lighting shining from the lamps, enemy combatants knew where the French soldiers were, and it inevitably led to the loss of many men. Barbier based his night writing system on a raised dot cell, 2 dots wide and 6 dots tall. Each dot or combination of dots within the cell represented a letter of phonetic sound. The problem with the military code was the human fingertip could not feel all the dots in one touch. As we mentioned, Louis Braille was born in the village of France. He lost his sight at a very young age after accidentally stabbed himself in the eye with his father's awl. Braille's father was a leather worker and poked holes in the leather goods he produced with awl. At 11 years, Braille found inspiration to modify Charles Barbier's night writing code in an effort to create an efficient written communication system for fellow blind individuals. He enrolled at the National Institute of Blind in Paris 1 year earlier. He spent the better part of the next 9 years developing and refining the system of raised dots that we know now by the name of Braille. After all Braille's work, the code was now based on cells with only 6 dots instead of 12, like the example. This crucial improvement meant that a fingertip could encompass the entire cell unit with one impression and move rapidly from one cell to the next. Over time, the world gradually accepted Braille as the fundamental form of written communication for blind individuals. Today, it remains basically as he invented it. However, there have been some small modifications to the Braille system, particularly the addition of contractions representing groups of letters or whole words that appear frequently in a language. The use of contractions permits faster Braille reading. It also helps reduce the size of Braille books, making them much less cumbrance. Braille passed away in 1853 at the age of 43, a year before his home country of France adopted Braille as its official communication system for blind individuals. A few years later, in 1860, Braille made its way across the pond to America, where it was adopted by the Missouri School for the Blind in St. Louis. So you could see the developments of Braille throughout the country and how it developed. Then in 1869, we see the introduction of Braille code. 1832, Braille code was adopted as a standard English code. In 1832 to the late 1960s, most students with blindness were taught to read and write Braille. In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act allowed students with a visual impairment to attend local public schools. Braille was not taught to all students in public schools. 1975, Congress passed Public Law 94 to 142, the Education of All Handicapped Children Act, which includes the Free and Appropriate Education Act, FEPI. 1991, the National Literacy Act defines literacy as an individual's ability to read, write, and speak in English and compute and solve problems. In 1995 to 1996, approximately 54,000 students were legally blind, but only 4,070 students were taught Braille in public schools. In 1997, a revision to the Individuals' Disabilities Education Act states, in the case of a child who is blind or visually impaired, provided for the instruction, the use of Braille unless individualized education program. 1997, the EAP teams rarely determined Braille as the appropriate pathway to blind literacy. And then in 1999, Braille instruction was proposed as a pathway to national literacy for students who were blind, mainly contested the move as a violation of students' IEP. Lewis Braille's legacy has enlightened the lives of millions of people who are blind. As a result, blind individuals from all over the world benefit from Braille's work daily. So just, this is a basic English Braille alphabet. So A, B with the dots on, it identifies it to the person. It's more likely that we can't understand it, but the person that's blind or has visual impairments is able to understand what that actually means and how it supports them. So it's a great support for them. Let's learn Braille. So using the alphabet that has been put on the desk, please write your name using the Braille coins or blue tack provided. Extension, if you are confident with writing your name, choose someone on another table and write them a secret message. So this is something that you can do in your own time using that Braille alphabet. Reflect, how could we use Braille within a care setting to make service users aware? And how could you make Braille into a rewarding activity for young people to allow inclusive practice for all service users? So this is something to think about and reflect on. How can it be used in the care setting? And it is used nowadays. Today it's very, it's used quite a lot. And how can you make it interesting for young people to use it? So it's something that needs to be looked into and can be identified. So reflect on that. Where's Braille used today? Can you think of Braille every day? So it could be used everywhere. It could be used on computers. It could be used, for shopping. Today, we prescribe Braille code in many different languages worldwide. Lewis would be very proud to know his creation has given literacy to countless numbers of people over the decades. Consequently, people who are blind can enjoy all the printed word has to offer, just like everyone else. The effect is tremendously empowering and helps them achieve success in schools and their careers. So several groups have been established in the last century to modify the Braille. Braille can be used in restaurants, it could be used in gyms, and it's used in day-to-day society everywhere. So it's used to write books. It could be there for door signs, restaurant menus, and for labeling. Medication, that's a big one that it's being used for. Public signage. And, you can find it everywhere, in lifts, on cash machines, on keyboards. You can find Braille everywhere in offices, and it is currently used by 6 million blind people around the world. And it's, it's growing every time. So you could use it on your computers, on tablets. It's always been established to help people with different communication skills. Braille software. So this software creates Braille and comes into a wide range of packages, including those to create mathematical and musical resources, as well as text and to translate different language. So this could be used by people that, have, want to listen to music, but also create any sort of mathematical resources. using the memory. So using your memory as a table, try and decide what is written down on a piece of paper by spelling out your letters using Braille. So it's quite interesting to identify these kind of things. So well done, you've worked hard today. Great teamwork skills, super Braille today. And you know, Braille is used everywhere now today in society. We've got over 6 million people that are blind and that need the use of Braille, especially in the health and social care profession. You know, things like trying to identify where the toilets are, trying to you know, identify what something says. You know, a leaflet may be done in Braille. You know, things like signage that's done in Braille. Things like, you know, restaurants, if you're going into a restaurant, in the cafe, you know, the menu, you know, it could be written in Braille for a person who can't see the menu. And it's sometimes they, if it's people that have visual impairment, sometimes they print the menu out in a large size. But you know, is can be used in all sorts of things within the healthcare professional, and it could be used a lot in way of making notes for individuals. So if they're in class, you know, trying to do resources that are in Braille for that individual to try to help that individual, and also things like, you know, if they've got any issues around, you know, it's the best aid for individuals, and it is the best aid for them, you know, in regards to in today's society, because Braille is used so much today, and is needed within the health and social care profession, and is needed within any profession. You go to a restaurant, a gym, a shop, you know, you see a sign on a wall, you see any leaflets, they're all done in Braille, and this identifies the importance of Braille within any sector, not just the health and social care sector. Thank you for attending today's session, and the next session will be tomorrow, which will be a learning outcome 5, and then the assignment discussion. Thank you.